Hello everyone. Just adjust this here. Yeah, hello. So I am here today to talk about how our children are always, every minute of the day, communicating information to us. And why that's so important and how we know that too. And this is a not very well understood concept in parenting, and so I want to, you're going to probably actually hear me talk about this a lot, because it's one, if we can really figure out what it is our children are communicating through their behaviors and actions, we become so much smarter and so much attuned. And part of the problem is that we get so involved in our own head and our own thinking that we miss what's going on in front of us. We miss interpreting the signals that our children are giving to us at any moment. So, and sorry if it's 100 degrees here today in Denver, and I decided to be outside because I like to be outside, and I'm in the shade, so I figured that's good enough. And I'm going to take off my shoes so I have cool grass on my feet. So if I'm sweating, that's why, because it's so hot. So our children are communicating to us at every minute of the day. So what that really means is up to 90% of communication that happens between adults is nonverbal. It is our body language. And we don't really... we don't have a huge awareness of that. Most people don't, because in our Western society, we value articulation. We value, the words that are coming out of people's mouths. Look at me right now. I'm communicating to you both verbally and non-verbally, and I want to deliver some really important content here. And so, but we value that content in general. And I'm going to try to find a spot that doesn't have there we go, that's much better. There's not shadow going back and forth across my face. So so we value that, and we sort of think, it's an evolutionary process, and that, we're smarter if we can talk really well. But again, up to 90% of our communication is nonverbal, which is huge. It's a huge number. And this is significant for our children because, they don't have a good command of language. There's a lot of adults who don't have a lot of command of language. I'm talking to adults all the time. What do I say to my kids in this situation? This just happened. This blow up just happened. Or my child is swearing. Or my child's saying these things. Or this horrible thing just happened. What do I say? We don't typically actually have a great command of the English language. And what children and human beings, I think you can relate to this, one thing we all understand is the intent behind our words, right? What is our heart provoking? What is our heart feeling about what we're talking about? Most of us can intuit that. That felt good. That felt genuine. That felt heartfelt. We know what that feels like. And for our children who don't understand how the world works, we can try to explain it, which is, little bits and pieces here and there is helpful, but most parents get into long explanations of how the world works, which is way over our kids' heads. But they do understand the intent behind it, so what we're carrying, the weight that's behind it. And so what that means too in terms of, working with our kids and how our kids are always communicating with us is that their body language, and I'm only talking about kids communicating with us. We're also communicating to them all the time, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're talking about what they're communicating to us. And so what, we know they don't have a great command of the language. Kids typically communicate through their behaviors. And what we can do is we can start observing. We can just start because no two children are the same either. They're all human beings are different and unique in many, many ways. And so I can't sit there and say, you know, this type of behavior means this type of behavior means that. There are certain generalities I can sometimes make, but there's a danger to that for sure. And I'm coming up, you know, I'm meeting with clients all the time who I'm always asking, what does that mean? You know, and it's different for each child. And so, this is one of the things I love to do, is to really like, what is that child saying? And so the things that I really look at is how they move in their body. How do they interpret the world in terms of, from a sensory standpoint? So what information, you know, the sounds and sights and smells and touch and taste that they're receiving from the world, how are they responding to that? And what does overwhelm look like for your child? You know, and I mean, an example of this might be a barking dog. You know, some children are going to be laugh and get giddy, and other children are going to be, you know, withdrawn and tepid about something like that because it scares them. And even children who are laughing and giddy, there's this minor distinction between a nervousness around it and a relaxed nature around it too. And so, you know, a child who's never been around dogs and hears this barking can, you know, even though they might be laughing and giddy, it might be a nervousness to it. And, you know, we all talk about, as mothers and fathers, how we learn our children's cries, right? Like, well, that cry means they're hungry. That cry means they have a dirty diaper. That cry means they're tired. Super smart. And that is you know, a great first step in learning our children's nonverbal way of communicating with us. And so, but I would really invite you to take that to the next level and really look at a whole host of other things. So what is their facial expressions telling you? What are their body movements telling you? Really looking for, you know, what is the tone of their laughter? You know, when I talk about nervous laughter versus relaxed laughter, what is the tone of that? What is the tone and intonation of the, just their speaking in general, and in their play or in their regular conversation with you? Is it, you know, rigid, and is it tight? Is it rigid? Is it high-pitched? Is it relaxed? You know, those are the things, you know, from a very basic standpoint, the main thing I oftentimes start with is it rigid or is it relaxed? Because that gives me a whole host of information about where that child might be fitting into how they're feeling in their body. And that's one of the first things that I really look for. Is I typically dive deep into what happens in this scenario and that scenario, and how it shows up. And I'm looking for key features of rigidity or relaxation. So those are things you can really look for. So their posture, you know, that, you know, you can tell a lot from a person's posture in any given moment. And in terms of like how their nervous system is responding to their environment. And these are huge things when you think about they're spending thousands of hours, you know, responding to their environment. Over time, there's certain patterns that develop. And so we're looking for what those patterns are. And I can't tell if people are on here or people are writing comments. So yeah, what else is there? So I've talked about facial expression, you know, even the jaw or grinding their teeth, those kinds of things, intonation, and it's called, you know, prosody or prosodic vocalization. So just the tone of voice is basically what that's referring to. They're, you know, how fast or slow they're moving. Are they going from one thing to the other? Or are they just sort of methodically moving along from one thing to another? Huge difference. So you can read a lot into a person's nervous system just based on clear observation without any conversation. So it's really brilliant. And if you can develop a practice of this, you can become so in tune or attuned to your child and how they're experiencing the world, so you know how to work with your child. You know how to approach your child. You know how to support them through things that are hard. You can learn where they're stuck. And there's nothing wrong with your child. These are all normal things. We all get stuck. We're human beings, right? We all have places where we're not so mature. And so we all have places where we can grow more. And when you're the parent observing this, you can take a really active role in supporting your child through things without actually saying a word, by using play, by listening well. So those are many more conversations along the way, but the starting point in so many ways is learning how to be a good listener from the standpoint of, and the way I'm using listener in this presentation is about observation. So meaning that your own dialogue in your head isn't getting in your way of observing and understanding what's going on with your child. So this is such an important thing that will, if you can make this a practice on a regular basis, it will dramatically change your perspective and how you view the world. It will change how you read your coworkers if you are in a workplace, or your mom friends or dad friends or your parents, or you will start to see, oh wow, look how they slump a lot, or look how their faces turn down, or just look at all these, how they move throughout life. Like they've had a need, and these patterns, especially as adults, when we have these patterns, it's because we had long periods of challenging things that have happened that we didn't get support for. And there's nothing wrong with that person, but we can give us huge insights to how they have responded to hard things that have happened, and in a way that meant survival for that person, that they responded in a way that would help them get through a difficult thing, which was smart and serve them in the moment, but perhaps it doesn't serve them in the moment now, obviously. But we are not all aware of that, right? And we don't need to tell people what we see, but we can, when we're parenting, we can take that information and we can use it to support growth and development and attunement and brain development and so many wonderful things by just observing. And I'm just going to give you an example too. This is more of an adult example, but even the facial expression piece is huge. It's a really huge one. And in fact, like there's some information around just like even the top half of the face, like especially around the eyes and the forehead, and how we interpret and how we understand and how we react and respond to the facial expression just in the top half of our face. An example I was thinking about today is like when you're talking to somebody and they understand you, they understand exactly what you're talking about, even though they don't respond verbally, versus when you're talking to someone and they don't understand you at all, they have a quizzical look on their face, even though they don't say a single word. Typically, we know absolutely the difference between those two. We can tell when, geez, they're thinking, or they're just not getting it, and we can see that in their eyes, in their, this part of their body, or like we can see it, also if they're getting it, we can see that in that part of their body too. And this speaks volumes from our kids and to our kids as well. So, but I don't want you to get so, thinking about this so cognitively that you're stuck on, these little tiny things that we might do. I really want you to think of this as a bigger picture of, even if your kids are across the room and they're playing, that you can take micro moments to watch them and observe them and see what they're doing, and make some ideas around, I wonder if, oh, my child's banging, the hamburger bun on the play kitchen, really, really hard. What does that mean? To me, that shows a tightness. It could be playful though too, and relaxed. So I can't draw a judgment from that, but we can typically make some, read about what that might mean, and then watching what happens afterwards too. And I cannot tell you enough how much that's helped me in my parenting to really tune in. And attunement is absolutely critical for brain development, for growth, for connection, for having, warm parent-child relationships. And that piece of the communicating outside of words is so significant. And it is a skill that the more you do it, the better you get at it. Adults are a little harder because we learn to mask things. Kids are actually usually pretty easy because they're just so spontaneous and they haven't learned, oh, I can't do this. I mean, sometimes they do, I can't behave, or I can't think or feel this way in this environment. As adults, we do that. But kids, typically, the younger they are, they're just spontaneous in their feelings, and the feelings come up and they come through their body. And so even when they're not expressing big feelings, they're still showing us how they're doing. And one of the ways I look at that too is to think about how safe they feel in the world. So when I'm observing a child, I'm thinking to myself, is the child in his or her movement showing me that they feel relaxed, safe, and confident in this environment without saying a single word? And that's definitely one thing I look for as well. And I feel so confident that their body language at any given time can tell you that. And we can respond appropriately when they're communicating that information. And oftentimes that information comes to us before things go off the rails, which happens with kids, right? Hard things happen. And so I really invite you to be quiet. I really invite you to take tiny moments throughout the day, micro moments, and just observe and what's happening here? And just ask yourself, be curious about it without judging it, because we can sometimes get over involved, right? And we start to judge it and get worried and, oh my God, something horrible is going to happen. And the more you do this, the more you practice this, I almost guarantee you, I obviously can't guarantee it, but I will say that you will make, by leaps and bounds, your relationship with your child will grow, because you will understand better how a child's off-track behavior is showing up in their body, and that they're not trying to be mean, they're not trying to be bad. Your child is not trying to be hurtful or manipulative. They're just trying to get through the day, right? They're just trying to figure out how to survive their body, who's taking in all this stimulus from the world. That's a lot. And our world today is huge in terms of what it's putting on kids in terms of stimulation, and things that it's feeding into their sensory systems. So yes, that piece of listening and observation and turning off our own mind and judgments, just being curious, is a huge step and a great way to support your parenting journey. So I would love to hear any comments on how that goes, or if you've tried that already. So thank you so much, and I look forward to more.